I am Dr. Ray Dykes, and this is the Personal Faith Program. This is a series of podcasts on personal faith with a passion, how to know what you really believe. I remind you that there's a workbook, work pages in the book, Personal Faith with a Passion, and you can order that book at Parodocspress.com, P-A-I-R-O-D-O-C-S press.com. This podcast is about, is there going to be a judgment day, and where do you go from here? Do you believe in a judgment day in the end of time? If so, what happens then? If you don't believe in a judgment day at the end of time, why not? Michelangelo painted the picture of Judgment Day on the end wall of the Sistine Chapel of the Vatican in Rome. Some of the people in the picture are going up, and some of them are going down. Jesus is standing in the middle. Some speak of this as the sheep going up to heaven and the goats going to hell. This celebrated piece of art has had a profound impact on Christian understanding of Judgment Day as described in Matthew 25. Long before Michelangelo painted that picture on that wall, there was a great debate about Judgment Day. It started with Paul. Paul was the first one in Christian writings to write about Judgment Day. Before that, in Zoroastrianism, there had been a Judgment Day. The debate continues today, often with the added problem of the situation of the soul after death. When someone dies, does that person's soul go into a holding tank of souls, or directly to heaven or hell, depending on whether or not he or she was saved? Does there have to be a judgment day before you can have heaven and hell? If so, there's a whole lot of souls in the holding tank. Some early Christians said there was a holding tank which served as the place where people were purified after death. Origen, a brilliant Christian writer from the first half of the 3rd century, is reported to have said that people were sent back to life on earth to get right the second time if they didn't get it right the first time, because they still had time until the second coming and before the eventual judgment day to get it right. There was a little bit of reincarnation involved in Origen's teaching. Here's a classic example of a theological conundrum. Ralph is looking forward with great fervor to the second coming of Christ and the judgment of all souls over which Jesus is supposed to preside. After the judgment, the good souls, the sheep, will go to heaven to live eternally with God and Jesus. The souls judged by Jesus to be bad, the goats, will go to hell to burn eternally in the flames of the lake of fire, presided over by the devil and his hordes of demons. At the same time, Ralph's mother, Alice, recently died. She was a good Christian woman, a faithful church member who loved the Lord and served him faithfully. She had been saved when she was 14 years old. Ralph cannot imagine his mother's soul being stuck in a holding tank with billions of other souls, some of whom are very unsavory characters like Adolf Hitler, Attila the Hun, Queen Jezebel. Therefore, he believes that immediately upon her death, his mother rested safely in the bosom of her Lord. The problem is that Ralph can't have it both ways. These two positions are in direct conflict with one another. Ralph has to decide one way or the other. That is to say, either all souls are going to be judged at the end of time at the judgment day, or that they go immediately to their destination. Unless he can come up with a new third position, which would be very creative. This traditional belief in Judgment Day or end of the world is seen in burial practices. Most people in most cemeteries are buried with their feet toward the east and their heads toward the west. Pastors are taught in seminary and divinity school always to stand at the west end of the casket when doing the interment service, because that's where the head is in traditional ceremonies. We do that because of the unconscious faith that on the resurrection day or judgment day or end of the world, all the dead people's bodies are going to be reconstituted in some mysterious way. All the dirt will fly off their graves. The casket lids will unlock and open, and without moving their feet, their bodies will angle up 90 degrees and be facing Jerusalem. Go to an old cemetery and check out the positions of the graves. In the old cemetery, some of the new ones, this is different. But the question is, when do the souls and bodies reconnect, or do they? Now, let's talk about where do you go from here. Do you believe in a physical, material, geographical heaven and or hell in the life hereafter? If so, describe it or describe them. If not, what do you believe about life with or without God hereafter? What if in the last life we humans didn't have any mass? What if we were all energy? Energy and mass are the only two things that exist in the universe, and mass is maybe only the visible confluence of energy anyway. What if we were all energy in the last life and we lived our lives there and we tried to be good and we tried to believe, and God promised us if we did that right, that in the next life we could have mass. So we went along and we did it and life was good, and then we died. However that happens to energy beings, and we were reborn into this life as energy with mass. For this 70, 80 years, we get to enjoy the pleasures and endure the pains of mass on this planet before we go back to being energy without mass in the next life. What if this life is the heaven we were promised in the last life? What if we yearned in the last life to be able to eat food and drink beverages and sleep and make love and play golf and walk in the sunlight? Many people are sitting here saying this life isn't good, the next life is going to be better. Well, what if this is the better that we were promised last time? Now that's some very different straw. What happens to your physical body when you die? There are those who say, well, the physical body is gone. There are those who say that the physical body will be reconstituted, kind of like instant coffee. You pour hot water and the ashes are reconstituted. There are those who say that miraculously the human body comes back together again, rearranged a little bit, hopefully better. There are different concepts and theologies about the human body after death. Where are you on this topic? You have to look at your mortality right in the eye and say, here's what I hope for in the next life. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. That's in Hebrews 11:1. What do you hope for after physical death? A small experiment has demonstrated that most people hope for the same thing in the next life that they hope for in this life, indicating that most of us see the next life as an extension of the hopes and dreams of this life. Matters of salvation, heaven, hell, kingdom of God, judgment day, and the afterlife are big issues for your faith, and they're all connected with your concept of the nature of God. The questions raised in this podcast, like all other questions in this series of podcasts, are weighty and thought-provoking. Does this material touch your clay? How? Why? Why not? See you next time.